Welcome back. So in this video, similar to the last video that I did, I'm going to be talking about rendering xParticles, but this time with Redshift. For me, I have more experience with Octane than with Redshift. But as the tides sort of started to turn towards Redshift as kind of more of an industry standard for rendering, added that to my tool set. And there's definitely some things that I think work better in Redshift than in Octane. There are a few things that I like, specifically with dealing with xParticles with Octane over Redshift. But there's also a very good chance that there's just some stuff in Redshift that I just don't know yet. And if I do something here and you think to yourself, there's a much better way to do that, by all means, please leave a note in the comments and let me know. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. One more thing. In my Octane video, I only talked about rendering particles, but I think that in this Redshift video, I'm just going to go ahead and combine particles and trails. I probably should have done that for the Octane video, but I'll probably make a shorter video where I just exclusively talk about rendering trails with Octane. But I think for Redshift, I'm just going to combine rendering particles and rendering trails in one video. So let's jump right into it. We're going to set things up in a very similar way than I did in the Octane video. So this might look familiar if you watch that one. We just want to get some particles on the screen. So let's make turbulence, adjust some values, and just up the amount of particles a little bit. Press play. And we get something like that. Let's actually go in here and also do a gradient random. And we'll just keep this default gradient just so we have some color variation in these particles also. All right, so we've got something like this. And without doing anything, I forget. I think that Redshift might render something. No, it doesn't. It renders nothing by default. All right, so in order to get just the basic rendering of some particles, all you have to do is right-click on your emitter, go to Render Tags, and add a Redshift object. Under here, under this Particles tab, you can just come under here, and you've got a bunch of primitives. So to compare and contrast, here is already one area where Redshift does a bit of a better job than Octane, in that you just have these built-in primitives, if that's all you need. All right, so in a certain situation, maybe all you need, let's just kind of go through these primitives. So the first one is point instances. And that's basically going to give you something like a basic emission shader. So it's just flat colors, and yeah, the particles just have their designated color based on the display parameter for your particles. So the actual particle color, that is the particle attribute, that's what's going to come through here. That just comes through by default. That's really nice. That's a really simple, easy, two-click setup. So that's nice. Similar to Octane, it's a little bit more explicit here, where this thing says scale multiplier. If you saw that Octane tutorial, you know that I talked about the relationship between the scale of the object that you assign to be the particle, and that its size is a multiplier to the actual particle radius. You can see the radius here is 3, and then our multiplier is set to 1. So that means that all these particles have a radius of 3, because it's the radius times this multiplier. So you can see that if we take this multiplier and let's just say put it down to 0.3, then the scale of all these particles changes. But since radius is something that you very well may want to change dynamically with xParticles, If we go in here to our radius, and let's say we take the variation and we put that up to, let's say 2.9, and resim this. So now we have a variation of basically a particle that's almost 0 to a particle that's almost 6 in its radius. So now if we take that multiplier that's in this tag and say put that 2.3, we get something like this. So basically you just have nice control built directly in with this tag. Let's put this back to 1, and let's go through these other primitives that are built in here. So you've got point instances, you've got sphere instances, which is kind of just like some basic geometry. I don't have any lighting in here, but let's just make a light so that we can see. And yeah, so as the name states, it's just a basic sphere. I'm going to turn that light off. And then we also have quad instances, which again is just going to be kind of like an emission shader mapped to a quad that is always facing the camera. So you can see as we rotate, these squares are always facing the camera. So that can be pretty useful also. Obviously, you have custom objects. So that's similar to the Octane method where you're going to assign an object to be the particle. And then you have optimized spheres. And honestly, I don't know the difference between optimized spheres and the regular spheres. So maybe there's less geometry in these. I'm not really sure. Okay, so this is probably useful to show also that even if you do the point instances, which I said like are kind of like an emission shader, they do still, if you have a light in your scene, they still are gonna, have some sort of reaction to light. All right, so that's that. Now let's also, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to do less particles. So let's go down to actually like 500. And we're going to make a trail object. It's going to look like that. All right, so now we've got some trails in here. And for this, okay, so just so you know that by default, you get nothing. Turn this light off. Keep this very simple. So here again, right click, render tags, let's add a Redshift object. And again, in here, we've got a set of primitives. Now, I haven't talked about rendering trails in Octane yet in any of my tutorials, but I'll be doing that in the future. But the sort of short explanation is that this is an area where Redshift really beats Octane a lot, because Octane is extremely limited, and it does have a primitive, a thing basically where you don't have to actually have geometry in your viewport to render these trails, which is what you want, because if you do this with actual geometry, the performance is really, really bad. Within xParticles, it comes with this guy, the where's my tooltips? What's it called again? The spline mesher. And that's basically going to allow you to just have actual geometry in your scene. Let's just go ahead and make one really quick, just so that you can see. So if we create a spline mesher, drop this trails object in here, and let's take the size to say like 1, and press play. And so you can see that we have that same simulation, and we have real geometry and the viewport. depending on what you're doing, maybe this is something that you can use. But if you can, as you could see, this started to chug pretty quickly because this is a lot of geometry in the scene. And so you can see this is what that looks like. And yeah, it's just not, it doesn't perform all that fast. You do have a lot of nice controls in here. Like you can adjust the size. Hold down Control and click here. And I'm just going to bring down let's put another few points here and do something like that. No, oh, that's interesting. That seems like a glitch. Anyway, but yeah, you've got nice controls to be able to control what's going on. And you can't do this sort of thing with those primitives. So, you know, of course, there may be cases where you need this, like, let's say if we wanted to do something. I forgot. Yeah, just press delete. Let's say we bring this up to 5. So you could do, you know, lots of weird, interesting shapes of your trails with this. Things like that. If we take this and subdivide it once, you know, you can get these sorts of shapes. And you definitely cannot do this sort of thing with the primitives. So depending on what you're doing, you know, this might be useful. But if literally what you're doing is just making some good old-fashioned regular-looking trails, then yeah, you want to just use the built-in primitives because you can do a lot more trails that are going to perform a lot better. So anyway, all that to say that Redshift comes with these different primitives built in. So let's go in here and say hair strands. Let's just do what we did with the particles and check these out and see what they look like. Let's do a few less particles. Let's just do 100. So it's not a complete mess. That's better. Okay. So you can see what those look like. Let's see. They're very simple, but gets the point across. So these are hair strands. You've got boxes. Can't really, what we would need, you can see the difference when we look at the tips here. And I guess what we could do is increase the size, and that's going to make the difference between these a little bit more noticeable and apparent. So if we turn this light back on, you'll see what's going on. So we've got boxes, cylinders. Another big benefit that Redshift has over Octane with all of these is that all these primitives by default have caps on the end. And with Octane, the curve primitive does not have a cap on it. So there's a black hole on both ends of the trail. And that doesn't really look that good. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Okay, so then we've got capsules. Looks like that. This is probably the one that I use the most. We got cones, which looks like that. Well, this is like, oh, you know what? What am I saying? You actually, I forgot that in Redshift, you actually can adjust the scale in the same way that I was doing with that, with the spline mesher. So yeah, Redshift is head and shoulders better than Octane on this one. Again, as I've mentioned, I don't use Redshift as much. So But that same thing that I did there before, you should be able to do a similar thing here. So we want to do something like this. Yep, and that works just fine. So yeah, Redshift, much better than Octane on this front. That you have all this control, and yeah, you don't have to, you don't have to render any geometry. So yeah, definitely to have nothing even remotely approaching that in Octane. That's really nice. All right, so let's now these are all green. So how do you control the shading on these? I just did that so I don't have to, so we can just start over. So let's do capsules, and 1 is fine. Okay, so obviously you can just add a shader. You can add a shader directly to this guy. So just make that red and like that. So if you just want everything to have a uniform color, then you can just add a shader. You probably don't want to do that in a lot of cases. More than likely, there's a good chance you're going to want to have these have the same color as your particle. So how do you do that? So let's jump in to this material. It's very simple. Under utility, you're going to go to attribute and grab a vertex attribute. And the vertex attribute, under curves, curve color. Take this, put this into the color, and that's it. Okay, so now, as you can see, each particle is the same, or each curve is the same color as the particle that is trailing it. All right, so that's very easy. So similarly, if you wanted to add a custom object to your particle, so now this is kind of similar to Octane. So let's just go in here and make a custom object. We're going to make this cube our custom object. And then we're going to want to shade that. So let's just make another material and give it these particle colors. So let's come in here. Again, under utility, this one is actually under user data. And you're going to want to get this color user data node. And then here, you've got presets, particles, particle color. And you're going to take the out here and drop that into color. Drop this onto the cube. I don't think you have to reset that, but whatever. Oh yeah, not Octane, Redshift. And there you go. So now we've got a custom object, and that's how you get the material on the custom object. And you can, of course, do whatever you want with this. So we can take this and let's add our emission color in here and drop that in there. And then increase that. Go ahead and increase it all the way up to 2. You can keep going past 2 if you don't know. Whatever. But we'll just do 2. But yeah, so come on. Okay. So yeah, that's how you do that. same thing with this one, obviously. Add image color, drop that in there, and increase that. And so, yeah, now everything is nice and colorful. Cool. All right, so another thing that I showed in the Octane tutorial is you might also want a situation where you can assign colors or a like a gradient of colors to your particles that are not coming from your display colors. Obviously, you can color the particles just through this thing. So like if you just wanted, any sort of gradient to color your particles, you can just do it through here. You assign this material in the way that I just showed. Those are the colors that the particles are going to be. But in the last tutorial, I wanted to just have a random value also associated with each particle so that I could have a separate parameter to modify so that I could control, say, like how much some of these particles are emitting light, so that I could have a variation in that. Because what I just set up, all the particles are emitting light with the same intensity. And I wanted to vary that, then that means that I need to be able to create like a random value inside of each one of these, inside the particles as well as inside of the trails. So in Octane, that's really easy because there's something called a random color node, and that's what it does. You just put it on there and it gives you random colors. To my knowledge, that's not as straightforward in Redshift. And if somebody knows the way to do that in a way that is simpler than what I'm about to show, again, please share with me. Like I said, I don't know as much about Redshift as I do about Octane. But you can still do it in Redshift. It's just not nearly as straightforward, at least in the way that I figured out how to do it. So let's jump into that. And basically, the way to do that is that in the earlier tutorials, when I was talking about all the different particle attributes that you have, so you've got a lot of different things that are associated with it. You've got like your color, you've got your radius, you've got another attribute that's called scale, all this different stuff. Well, within here, you've also got these physical attributes. Where are they? They're under extended data. So you've got physical data, you've got fluid data, and you've got custom data where you can just add attributes to your particles that are just arbitrary, for whatever effect that you might want to do. And you can, reference those in Espresso or in xParticles questions and stuff like that. There's certain modifiers where you can, you can pull and do stuff with that data. But in here, you've got this physical data. So you've got things like friction, bounce, temperature, smoke, fuel, fire. Now, if you are not doing anything with the explosion effects, then like these temperature, smoke, fuel, fire, these things, they're not really doing anything. They're just there. They've got a default value of 0 with a variation of 0. So you can actually use that to just give yourself some random values and then pull that up in your shader to be able to get some arbitrary random values to do things in shading. So in here, under user data, we've got scalar user data. So we pull that and come in here, go to particles, and you can see that we've got a bunch of presets in here. You can see that they've got the XP thing here next to it. So these are all the xParticles attributes that we can get information from here. So things like age, life, all this sorts of stuff. Like, so for instance, if you just wanted a grayscale from black to white, ramp essentially over the age of the particles. Like you could use these and you can plug that in and use that for shading. But I'm just going to grab one of these guys. So let's grab fire, which I'm not going to be using it for anything. And let's create a modifier here. So xParticles, that's going to be under here. I forget which one of these. It's there it is, XP physical. So with this, we can modify one of these. So we used fire. So let's go under fire, and we're going to change the fire, and we'll just say change it over time. The rate of change, I'm going to put this to 1. I don't actually know if that's seconds or frames or what. And the variation, I'm going to set it to 100, and max fire, I'm going to say 256 for the 256 values that we want. We could basically put it in any range. This is kind of arbitrary which ranges I'm picking in here. So let's take that, and we also want, let's see, I forget where that is. So let's just do this. This change range, and we're going to take that, and then we're going to grab a ramp. Just hold on. Let's take this, and we'll just do this into emission color. Which one of these guys? Source we want. That is not what we want. Excuse my struggling. Let's just do it like this. This is not normally do it. Alt input. Okay. Cool. So in here, this just says 0 to 1, 0 to 1. So we'll wait a second, and let's actually just take this and take it out of here, out of color here, and put it into the regular color and the emission color. So now, okay, so you can see we've got, let's turn our, just so we can see this, let's turn our trails off and get more particles. And you can see we've got some that are black and some that are white in here right now, but we're gonna tweak this some more. Okay, so now what we want to do is come in here and let's adjust this old range max and start bringing this up. So let's put this up to me, what I've found is just kind of playing with this until I like the spread of the values, right? Like until it's got enough white, enough black, enough gray. I just turned on the light so we could see them a little bit better. So you have some control to be able to adjust this and adjust these values. Let's see. Whoops. Jeez. Yeah, so let's put this back to 0. Okay, so now we've basically got random grayscale values in here. But then we also have another sort of lever of control here. So we have this ramp. So let's say if you were like, this is cool, but there's too much white here, then you can just pull this in. It's very sensitive, clearly. And you can see we can still make adjustments. So with these two things, with these two sort of control levers, you can get a nice spread of values in here. And of course, you can do things like this also. And yeah, and have a lot of control over which particles are going to be lit, how many particles are going to be lit, all that sort of stuff. This is a little hacky. And again, if you know a better way, because I don't, I much prefer the Octane method of just grabbing the random color node and dropping that on there. But yeah, this is what I found that works, and it's pretty easy. So now we can take this. Let's put this back into our color. We probably, I'm not sure if we need to resim, but let's resim. There we go. So some of these are going to be illuminated. Some of them are not. And what we can also do, similar to what we did in Octane, is combine this now with the colors. So we want, what is that node called? Color, I think it's this guy, color composite. Is this the composite mode? Yeah, we can use this multiply. So we want to take this and multiply it with this, and then we're going to use that for the emission. And let's maybe go in here. And let's turn our light off. That might be too much. There we go. And maybe let's just go in here and increase the amount of emission. So let's make this be like 20, a lot brighter. All right, so similar deal where we've got some that are emitting, some that aren't emitting. There's kind of like some default light in here. So let's see how we do that. You go into here. There we go. This is a bit, so now that we kind of take out the sort of like default lighting, it's a bit more apparent that, some of these are illuminated, some of them aren't, and the color of the illumination is coming through. So this is, again, basically just very similar to what we did with Octane. Okay, now let's go back to rendering trails. Now with trails, it's a bit simpler to get some random colors in there. There is a node that we can just grab. So it's actually this same node. So if we just make a copy of this, just instead of curve color, what we can do is say curve ID color. And actually what I found is that the curve ID normalized works a bit better. So we can just take that, and for now, let's just put this in the color and in the emission. And we turn that back on. So, well, okay. So there is some variation in here. It's a little hard to see because it's not a bunch of contrast, but there are all grayscale values in here. So of course, in order to get more control over that, we will take this and pipe it through a ramp. And you can see now we've got more contrast and more variation in there. So we can do the same thing basically with the curves. We're solid now. Some of these are illuminated and some of them aren't. Let's make it pretty like limited, just a few of them, maybe something like that. Okay. So then we're going to take this and do the same thing. So we'll take out color, do that, and then grab a color composite. Actually, I don't know if this makes a difference, but let's just do that anyway. And then put this to multiply. And you can see we get something like this. And let's actually, again, go down here and increase the amount of emission. So let's put this like to 20, just so we can really see those curves that are illuminated. Okay. So let's grab our emitter. We'll spread it out a little bit more. Let's get some more time. Let's 100 frames. That's becoming too chaotic. So I guess let's do less particles. Maybe 100. Nope, not 5,000. 500. Let's get rid of the variation in the particle size. Let's take the particle size down to 1. Let's go into our turbulence and maybe increase the scale a bit. Okay, so instead of that, let's do curl noise. Good old fashioned curl noise. And let's put these back to default values. I'm going to get rid of the frequency. And I am going to increase the scale. There we go. Let's get something like that going. And let that run for a little bit. Okay. There we go. So might want to, just to make something interesting, probably change this, that this emitter a line kind of works for certain situations. For something like this, might change that. But hopefully you get the idea. We can also go in here and add, let's add a Redshift camera and look through that. We can come in and add bloom, similar to Octane. Wrong thing. Increase the threshold. Okay. Can add bokeh, decrease aperture. Let's pick a focus distance. Let's say be about right here. And then just really push this. Let's say like 0.5. That'll work. Okay, so just to kind of do something that actually looks like something, looks kind of interesting. And yeah, with that, I think we've done up to the same, or we've actually done more because we also did the trails. But yeah, this is about what I showed with Octane. Remember, this is just an introduction. This can be obviously expanded on dramatically. You know, of course, the color of particles is something that can be changed dynamically through modifiers. So all that stuff can be animated and controlled and changed. But yeah, this is basically how you connect all that to the shaders. I just remembered what I haven't talked about yet, and that is groups. So that's very important. Let's jump into that, because groups, as I've mentioned a bunch of times, groups are something that you're definitely going to be using in xParticles, and you really need to know how to shade things that are in different particle groups. So let's learn about that really quick before we end this tutorial. So let's go to the emitter. Let's go to groups, hold down Control, and add a couple of groups. So we've got group 1 and group 2. I like to put them in order like this. So right now we've got a cube. Let's just make a sphere also. And let's make this sphere have a radius of 1. And this guy is going to be our second object that's going to be used for particle rendering. So we can grab this same material. I'm just going to copy it onto this sphere. And in the emitter, well, actually, what we want to do is we're going to add rendering tags, the Redshift object, to each one of these groups. And you can see that inside here, we have a thing to be able to render certain types of particles. So we're going to just say custom objects for both of these. And in group 1, we'll add the cube. And in group 2, we'll add the sphere. And our groups are set up to just be assigned to a random group. Just so that we can see this, let's go to particle group 2 and let's just load some different colors into particle group 2. Let that go for a bit. Okay. So I don't think we have to change that. I think it'll ignore it by default. Let's see. Okay, so now you can see that we've got that green in there. And what you can also see is that we've got these spheres. You can't necessarily see what. Let's keep this camera here, and then let's jump out of it though, and just zoom in on our particles so that you can indeed see that we've got some that are cubes and some that are spheres, and they both have they're different colors, and the material that is set to read the particle color is being respected, because you can see that the one that has the sphere has this green sort of gradient, is what I'm trying to say. And then the cube has the blue gradient that we were using before. So that's how you do that. Okay, so now I think that's about it for the basics of rendering particles and trails inside of Redshift. if I missed anything, leave a comment and let me know. Or if I probably should have kind of, sometimes when I do these tutorials, I'll kind of just like have a little checklist that I have to the side, kind of just wing it on this one. But yeah, I think I covered everything. So as always, if you like this content, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. Of course, as every single person doing this same stuff will tell you, that stuff helps out a lot. Like I said, since I didn't cover rendering trails in Octane, I'll probably make another video where we talk about rendering trails in Octane and basically how to do this same stuff in Octane with trails. So look forward to that. And yeah, I think that's about it. I'll see you all in the next video.